Hi. Hey guys. Welcome back to another episode of the Let's Talk About It video podcast with me, your host, Leah Suzette Newmoff. As you can see, I dropped down into a seat at the beginning tonight because we are cooking with a little bit of grease here, you guys. We've got fabulous hair, super cute crew neck with Cycle Bar Digs, and Boo just helped me set up the webcam, the OBS, the mic, the whole thing. So this is like test run, like 2.0. We are test running using the webcam. I got this set going. I added the plants, the lights. Very excited about my lights. And I feel like I'm just like winging this all over because I still don't have some kind of video editing software. So you're going to get to see me have a nice seat at the beginning. And guess what? You're going to see me get up at the end and press stop recording all the way over there on the computer. Still making things work. But what's important is that we're showing up weekly, getting this done so that new episodes drop for you guys on Wednesday. And I think what's important is the content here. We'll get fancy with the production later. I think this weekend, I'm going to go try to find a chair. We're going to work on some set design. We're going to work on some of the tech issues. I just spent like an hour setting this up, getting the microphone, everything working. We finally got the cord for that. And then also I ran into an issue with just trying to get the I don't know tech stuff. I don't know what I'm talking about. So I think that the graphics card is not enough for this. We'll see what happens. Anyway, guys, welcome back to another episode. This week in the Full Circle Wellness community and right here on the podcast, we are talking about creativity. And before you cringe, stay with me. I'm actually talking about creativity in a lot of different ways. So I'm going to dive into my story a little bit because I went to art school. So I think we're going to have some fun with that. And then I'm also just going to talk about creativity in terms of using creativity as a tool for healing, particularly healing heavy shit. Trauma, emotions. We're going down that road tonight. And then I think we're going to touch on a little bit of creativity for joy, art for art's sake. I've got some funnies. I've got way less notes than usual, guys. We're just going to kind of riff on this, okay? This is like kind of my wheelhouse. Doing this whole thing is not quite my wheelhouse, but it is my outlet for creating these days. So we're just going to start right at the beginning of the journey. But before we do that, I did want to I know I mentioned it, but shout out to my hair girl, Cheyenne. She's been doing my hair since I was like, I think 22 years old. And she still does my hair today. And I finally got out to the salon. We talked about that last week. I went to the salon and she only had me down for a cut and I wanted to do like the color, the whole thing. So today, guys, we got the color. We're looking fabulous. We got the whole look going. So I'm excited. I'm having a fabulous little hair day and we're talking about creativity. And one of the ways that I think creativity shows up the most for me, and I think for a lot of us, is in that sort of self-expression. So like the way that we wear our hair, the clothes that we wear, the way that we do or do not do makeup, the way that we carry ourselves, the things that we have around us, the way that we design our home and the car that we drive. Sometimes I feel like a lot of times we don't exactly get to choose the car that we drive because let's be serious. I have been driving around a Camry that I bought from Greg. He gave it to me and he got a new car like years ago. And I've been rocking some front end damage for like 3 years that I just was like, I'm not going to fix it. It's not even worth it to me. I'm just going to drive the hoopty. But that's just me. I'm not like a car person. I want just something that's getting me from A to B. I'm not like trying to drive a Lamborghini. So that just doesn't matter. But stuff like the way that we show up in the world, I think a lot of that comes into creativity a little bit in terms of just like self-expression. And I personally have a lot of fun with that. I love a crew neck. I love my necklaces and my whole like jewelry stack and like doing the earrings, and I love the whole thing. I love an outfit. You guys have heard me talk about it. I love an outfit. I love expressing myself in that way. And I think a lot of times, like if I think back to when I was younger, I wanted to be that person still. Like, that's always just been something that I wanted to do. But I think when you're younger and you're sort of at the whim and will of like what your parents are willing to buy you or can afford to buy you, like if you don't have a job yet, right? You're just preteen, whatever. Like, you want to wear something and maybe your parents are like, no, it's like you don't get to express yourself the way that you want to. My parents, I think for the most part, really let me wear kind of what I wanted to wear. I wasn't trying to wear like booty shorts or something like that. I was like a total punk kid, you guys. I had like, we talked about this, I had like the purple hair, the bangs, I had the like thick eyeliner. I was like rock into the emo tunes and had on like the tight jeans, and it was a whole thing for a while. But I think a lot of that came from trying to fit in with like a certain crowd, because I felt like that's where I needed to fit in. I felt like that's where I belonged, but there was a lot of like inauthenticity there. And while I absolutely do love that genre of music, and I still have like full playlists with like The Used and Brand New, throwbacks to my Isley, if anybody knows who any of those people are, bless you, because I was all about me. Like, I was all about that in high school, and I still have playlists with all that kind of stuff on it. Atreyu, like, whatever. Obsessed. And I wanted to show up in that way, but the reality is that, like, that style is not the style that I like. So as I became an adult, I had to kind of, like, refigure out how I wanted to express myself and use my creativity in that way. Because truth be told, I've been used to being extremely creative in all kinds of other ways since I could pick up crayons. And I use that sort of like term all the time, since I could pick up crayons, because this journey for me of like art making and creating quite literally goes back to me being 5 years old, 4 years old at my great grand's house, sitting in this gigantic, well, I'm sure it wasn't gigantic, but for like a 4-year-old, it was gigantic. This giant, like antique looking, like velvet chair with a TV dinner tray. Like, you know, the like folding out like TV dinner trays. This thing was probably from the 60s, maybe the 50s, very old looking. It was like vinyl. And I would have my like lined notebooks, all of my colored pencils, all of my crayons. And I was obsessed. I'm completely obsessed with drawing and writing stories and creating characters. I had this whole character series that I called The Big Bacon. You guys, honestly, it could probably make a really fantastic children's series, and maybe one day I'll just decide, like, for fun, to bring that to life again. It was like a character Bacon that had friends like Mr. Sausage Link and Mrs. Waffle and Mr. Pancake and like all these breakfast friends, and it was cute. I was in like 4th grade when I came up with this, and I remember getting in trouble with a teacher one time because I was like, I wouldn't stop talking about the Big Bacon with my friends, and my teacher was like, Leah, stop talking about the Big Bacon, like no one cares about the Big Bacon. In hindsight, she probably really wanted to write a children's book and ended up being a 4th grade teacher. You just never know. I don't remember her name, but whatever. I also drew a lot of just like fairies, and like I was really obsessed with creating like characters within themes. So there would be like fairies, right? But then like the water fairy, the fire fairy, the earth fairy, the magic fairy, like all these different whatever. And then I would do like Pokemon drawings, totally obsessed with that. And as I got older, while that was something that I enjoyed, it started to occur to my parents and occur to me that it wasn't just something I enjoyed, it was something that I was really, really like good at. Like I had a natural talent for drawing something that I could see, whether it was, you know, a character like a Pokemon and I was recreating it in a notebook, or it was something physically in front of me and I was, you know, drawing that. Of course, you know, being a kid, it's not amazing, but by the time I was in 8th grade, I started taking creativity to a different place where, and I mean, I really didn't even notice this consciously. This is something that I'm just really kind of calling out in hindsight. But like in 8th grade, I very distinctly remember my mom when I was growing up, and I hope she doesn't mind me sharing this. When I was growing up, my mom would have night terrors where your body, you get like I think you get like full body paralysis at the same time that you're having like a nightmare and you can't like pull yourself out of the nightmare. And I think there's a lot more to it than that. I want to say it's like there's some neurological stuff going on there. There's some psychological stuff going on there. And I think ultimately in the medical community, it's like a mystery because there is, I think, some level of like woo-woo to night terrors. I'm not going to start talking about aliens, but I'll just leave that there. In 8th grade, I remember drawing specifically this like really creepy like chalk drawing of what my mom described to me as her night terrors, as sort of a way, I think, to process being in a home with someone that was having that. Because she would like wake up yelling because of the things she was dreaming about, right? And I think for a little kid, that was probably, just like daunting. I remember every time I would hear her, it would make my heart drop and like my heart would race, like, oh my God, like what's going on? And then I'd be like, oh, mom's just having a nightmare. It's okay. But I remember doing that drawing, and I had a teacher see that drawing, and, she asked me about it. I told her what was going on. I think she was probably concerned, like, oh my God, why is this child drawing these like freaky dark figurines, whatever. But I was like, oh, this is, what it is or whatever. And that was the first time I had a teacher tell me that I was probably like meant to be, destined to be, or just sort of innately that I was an artist. Like, you should probably go to art school. Like, you should take your art a little more seriously. And that like hit me. I was like, oh, okay, like I like that. That's cool. People do that, right? And I remember even further back than 8th grade, I think it was 2nd grade or 3rd grade, we had to draw like, oh, what do you want to be when you grow up, right? Like, people are drawing astronauts and firefighters and maybe doctors, like whatever. I feel like kids have these like crazy lofty ideas when they're kids. And honestly, we should not let go of those lofty ideas. I think that is part of like who we are meant to be. And society just like breaks that out of us. And that's a whole other conversation. But we're talking about creating here and creativity. And I'm telling you my story about art and how I like got into that and became an artist, right? So 2nd grade, 3rd grade, I want to say it was 2nd grade. It doesn't actually matter. I drew myself, drawing myself. Like, it was like a little me in a smock with like a French beret, and I had like a palette and a brush, and I was painting, and I was like painting myself, that sort of like MC Escher, like, mirror window sort of situation. And I think, as a kid, I always kind of knew that I wanted to be a creator in some capacity. And it didn't start to show up for me as a healing tool until I was an adult. And honestly, not even until like 2017, 2016, very beginning of my healing journey. Because even leading up to then, it was very much, okay, I just have to finish the schoolwork. I just have to draw the naked man that's standing in front of me. Like, well, art school guys, we'll get there. I have to do it right and get better, and that's going to get me a job. So stepping back a little bit, I went to high school, and I'm not going to lie, I'm not going to sit here and deny my privilege. I went to like an all-girls private school, and they had a really fantastic art program, amazing teacher, Mrs. Burton, if you're still out there, I remember you. And I spent all 4 years of high school very ingrained in doing like my studio studies. Obviously, I had to do everything in high school, right? You've got your math, guys, I sucked at history. History was not my jam. And honestly, it's funny that I really like to write now as an adult, because English was not my jam either. I was terrible at English, mostly because I wouldn't do the homework, or like I wouldn't read the assignments, and then I would be trying to like pull together these papers out of my ass, and I didn't know what I was talking about. But I mean, there's a lot to kind of unpack there, because I think there's a layer of like being in survival mode that was like in my life in high school. So I was like not thriving. It was like just neither here nor there. So I took my art studies pretty seriously, went through to like AP Studio, all of that jazz. And that was when I had my teacher say like, oh, are you going to art school? And I was like, art school? Like, that's an option? Like, I don't just have to go to college? Like, I could go to art college? Like, that's a real thing? So once that was like in my purview, I was like, okay, I'm going to go to art school. And here's what's funny. I was thinking about this today, or the other day today. I was thinking about this past couple of days, actually. You go to high school, you get to junior year, and you start taking like ACTs, SATs. You start preparing for college junior year, whether you're applying or you're just building extracurriculars, or you're taking those exams to kind of like get you in the door for, those with the SAT scores. I don't even know. Do they even do the ACTs anymore? I don't actually know. So you start doing all of that stuff, and you're just sort of expected to know what you want to go to school for and what you want to do. And I did not. It's interesting that I sit here and I talk about that sort of like being an artist, but in hindsight, I remember like being a senior and not being excited to go to college. Like, I remember thinking like, okay, this is just something I've got to do. the idea of it made me extremely anxious because I thought I have to go away to go to college. And at the same time, the prospect of that was also enticing. So there was like a lot of mixed emotions there. It's like I wanted to, but I was also afraid. There was this feeling of like, well, this is just what I have to do. This is just what everybody does. We go to college after high school. And then I thought, okay, well, I guess I'll just go to art school. Like that's a possibility. I'm really good at art. But in hindsight, I didn't even stop to think that maybe it would have been interesting for me to explore the realms of like psychology. Guys, I love psychology. I mean, what I'm doing now is a lot of like, I'm talking about mental health. I'm talking about health and wellness, like being physically well. And I think there's a lot of that that comes up for me in my life. And I think even then at a young age, it came up and I didn't even stop to think that like, could I do something like art therapy or whatever? And it's, again, kind of funny because now I'm trying to pull together, guys, I have all kinds of stuff in the works. If you are not keeping up with Full Circle Wellness, keeping up with what I'm doing with that, this podcast is just a facet of what I've got going on. I've got like workshops in the works. I'm putting together like a course. I want to write a book one day. Like there's so much that I want to do in the realm of health and wellness. And I think that creativity and creating is honestly, it's part of being fully well, because whether you are utilizing creativity in a healing journey, right? Whether it's like in the capacity of art therapy where you're utilizing something creative, and it doesn't have to be painting. It can be drawing, writing, filming, gardening, knitting, cooking. There are so many avenues for creating. That is like not even the tip of the iceberg. That was like a list of 5 things. You can do so much that will help bring you peace, because when you find something that you love to create, there is a flow state that you can get yourself into. You lose track of time, and there's this moment where you're kind of just, you're going and you're in it, and then you just become so present because you are just totally engrossed in what you're doing. And I've had this happen to me with painting so often, where I'm making something, I'm painting is just sort of my thing, right? So when I went to art school, I majored in painting. Painting was a major. That was my major. My bachelor's is in fine arts. So that's what I focused on. And there's a point where it's like I'm painting something, and it doesn't have to be something that I'm looking at. It doesn't have to be realistic. I am actually much more of an abstract painter, and I can get into that for hours and not even realize that the time has gone by. And over time, it has become such a spiritual practice for me. And when I started my healing journey, it really was something that helped me get present. It was almost meditative, and it helped me process emotions in a way that I couldn't necessarily articulate with words. So that's like one way I think that you can really tap into creating something. And it can be, you could get in that mode, right, with crafting clothing. You could probably get in that mode with gardening. You could do it with cooking, I'm sure. I think any form of like creating something. And I think the reason for this, I'm going to get woo-woo on you for a minute. I think the reason for this is that we are all part of creative energy, right? You talk about God, or the concept of God, as like the creator. I am not in the religious space, but I'm down with the word God. That's fine. I just think about it as more of like the universe, source, the all. It is the source of creation. Like it is both creating and destroying, like almost like the Force, right? We went on a little Star Wars tangent last week where it's like it's the simultaneous existence of like life, birth, and death, good and evil, creation and destruction, and we are all just a part of that. So we are all technically creators because we are part of the creation, like the whole creation. If you stayed with me for that, bless you, because I think I just maybe even lost myself there. I have a hard time, I think, still articulating some of the woo-woo ideas. Like, I understand what I'm believing, but articulating that is not my forte. So, tapping into creative energy, because I think we are creative energy, tapping into that is like the highest possible vibration you could be in. Joy, creating, it's the ultimate vibe. When you're in that, like when you're just vibing, that source is love. It's coming through you. It's coming out of you. You're flowing with it. You're not stopping to question. I think, I think a lot of people think, oh, I'm not an artist, and they approach creating like it's something that they can't do. They're like, oh, I can't. And maybe you really can't draw. Like maybe you're not the type of person who can look at something, discern it in three-dimensional space, and get it onto a piece of paper and make it look like it is still in three-dimensional space. That is a natural talent, but it's also something that you train to do. Like I didn't get good at that overnight. Like I just had to do it a lot, especially in college. So it was just like something that you have to like spend time training to do. And there are definitely certain people who can't do that. That's fine. There's nothing wrong with you. Maybe you have another creative outlet that you want to explore. Again, something like cooking, knitting, gardening, clothing making, designing your home. There are so many different ways that you can creatively express. And I think the point that I'm trying to make here is that when we are, particularly if you're working on healing trauma, and that's kind of where my journey with art shifted. I started working on healing my trauma. It went from, okay, I just need to get good grades in art school. I just need to like get good enough to get a job being a painter. I don't know what made me think I was just going to be a painter or like, you know, the next Andy Warhol or something. And you know what? It's a unicorn thing. It really is. I hate to say that, but going to art school is great. I mean, I learned a lot. There's all kinds of classes you have to take that have nothing to do with art. I took psychology. I took sociology. I took like health and nutrition. I took anatomy like 5 times. Anatomy in art school, you take anatomy like 3 times as a drawing class and then at least twice as a science. Like it's just, we're learning about the body. We are all up in the body in art school, guys, okay? And so particularly tangent with drawing, what they're trying to teach you, you learn how to do like, I mean, we drew the body from like the skeletal system out. Like we did these whole overlay things with drawing where we had to do the skeletal system, do the muscular system, label it, okay? So I'm all about, I know where the muscles are. I'm like, yeah, that's the traps. Those are the rhomboids. This is the pecs. Like, there's my lats. Like, these are the quads. Like, I know what they are. Not because I've studied, like, fitness, but because I've studied anatomy, like, 5 times. But what they were trying to get us to do was draw someone from the inside out. Like, learning the muscular skeletal structure underneath the skin so that when you look at someone, you can draw through them and not just draw them from the surface. That's a whole other thing. Again, tangent. But there was a break for me between doing that kind of work where it's like, it's practice, it's repetition, it's painting nudes, it's learning how to do color and capture light in space and just becoming good enough to say like, okay, I'm going to get a job after college, or I just want to pursue this as a craft, whatever. And then I started this like healing journey with art. And I think that's where my art became way more abstract. Although my senior thesis was absolutely abstract. At that point, I like had sort of settled into the fact that I like really prefer abstract work. But when it comes to like creating from feeling, 100% abstract, because there are no rules. There is, I'm feeling this and it's this color for me and this texture and this weight and this dimension and this composition, and that's what it feels like. So that's what I'm going to create. And there's something so freeing about that. So on the blog this week, if you haven't checked out the blog, fcwcommunity.com, head over to the blog. I wrote about creating for trauma. There was a piece that I created, and I would love to get up and grab it for you, but honestly, I'm not going to do that because it's actually a really big piece of artwork. If you'd like to see it, I did put it on social media, at @thereal_Leah Suzette. If you want to follow me there, it's on there. I painted this heart, and I'm actually like looking at it right now. I think that's 32 by 40 inches. I was dealing with grief, and not grief in terms of someone that I had lost. I hadn't like lost a loved one, but when I was healing trauma, and I would think about little Leah and going back into my childhood, there was a lot that I had to grieve. It was the grieving of things that I wanted and didn't have, feelings that I had to just sort of accept as what they were. Like, there's a lot that goes into that, especially when you are trying to become someone new. Because I've talked about this before when we had our conversation on mindset. When you're going to become somebody new, when you're ready to like make change, dive into personal development and work on your shit and clean up your side of the street and become somebody new, you have to be willing and ready to let the old version of you die. Like, that person has to go, because you don't become someone new without letting go of that person, their habits, their traits. If you're going to change, you're going to change. You can't be two people at once. And in doing so, there is a grieving process. And so I made this piece that I actually the title is Grief. It's just simply grief. And it's a heart, human heart, very largely drawn, saturated colors. It has a bunch of scarring and cuts, it's leaking, there's blood dripping, but there's also foliage growing out of it, life growing upon it. There's a bee, there's a butterfly. There are things that's like, okay, yes, there's death, but there's also a rebirth occurring here. And in creating that, there was something so healing for me. And I talk about that in the blog post. There was another piece that I did that is way too big to get on this camera. It's also sitting right over there. It's 36 by 48, so 3 feet by 4 feet, really, really big. And what I did was cover the canvas in paper mache. Like, I used recycled Chipotle bags, and I just ripped them, paper mache them to the surface to create this like rough, charred, scarred looking surface. And the entire color palette is black and red. And when I finally, and it took layers and layers, several nights in the studio. And when I finally got through with that painting, it was like, oh, there's my rage. Like, I can see it. I can see it. It's no longer in me. And that, guys, that is what's important about creating something. Whether it is, again, painting or writing or filmmaking or whatever, getting out the feelings of fear, trauma, anything that's heavy, anything that's weighing you down. If you have anxiety or depression, anything in your body that's like, I need to get this out, it has to have someplace else to live. And you can give it someplace else to live by putting it into a painting, into a piece of pottery, into a photograph, right? You can take that out of yourself and give it someplace else to live, and you can look at it and you can say, like, there it is, and it's no longer in me. And that is something that I think is so powerful about creating. That is something that I think creativity can give you that therapy can't, or, you know, just talking with a friend, or just journaling, or even just meditating. There's almost like a physicality about getting it out of your system that creativity can give you. Dance, you know, making music. God, how many songs, you guys, hit you like right here from like real artists that like pour their life into their work, and you hit that song and it's like, wow, that hit something, because they've taken something outside of them and put it in something else, in something creative. They've taken that chaos and made it something beautiful. I hate to do this, but I'm thinking of a Taylor Swift song. And I'm calling out Taylor Swift because honestly, that woman is amazing. And I believe her to be an incredible artist. I don't even have words for the level that she's at in terms of songwriting capability, business. Like, she's just fantastic. But she has a song on Folklore, her Folklore album, that's called Peace. And it's one of my absolute favorite songs. And she talks about this in one of her studio, like she did the Long Pond studio sessions. She did like a whole talk, filmed the album live, like sitting in her studio with Jack. And it was just like a whole thing. And she talks about, I think she's talking with Aaron Drosner when she's talking about this. She talks about like, she got that melody and it reminded her of peace and feeling peaceful with somebody. And then she said, but then I thought, what if I could never give you peace? Like, what if being with me means that there's always going to be a cloud that comes in? And she's talking specifically about, you know, being famous, you know, you might have a level, like a, moments of peace, but then you're gonna go out into the chaos because she's a famous person. There's gonna be paparazzi, like just, that whole thing. But that hits me in a different way. I think about that as having depression and having anxiety and having premenstrual dysphoric disorder. It's like, I can never give you peace because when you're standing with me, the rain is always gonna come, is like one of the lines in the song. Like, no matter how long you can have peace in a situation with me, there's always going to be a dark day right around the corner. So there's always going to be that luteal phase that hits, or something that triggers me deeply and sends me into a depressed state. Would it be enough if I could never give you peace? And that's one of those songs that I was just like, damn, guys. Like, she just put that out there, and I was like, oh, I just love you all the more. Anyway, so that is like taking something out of you, using creating as a form of expression, using that to heal, using that to get through trauma, or just, sometimes you can just pour joy into a piece of work. I love to do that. Seriously, if you look at the stuff in my studio, it is either really fucking dark or really, really bright, and it's like tons of joy, because I absolutely love the concept of like art for art's sake. Art for art's sake. Art for the sake of freaking making it, guys. Like, just have some fun. You like that image? Put it in there. Like, you like that color? Let's use it. I love that. Art school teachers don't love that. I had to find a way to, like, bullshit my way through that final thesis, because my theory on art has always kind of been art for art's sake, but that is just, like, not enough in art school. It needs to be, like, a little bit more artsy than that. So that really wasn't my jam, but I made it work. I graduated. Your girl's got her degree, so here we are. And all of these paintings are just hanging out over here because I'm not a salesperson. I tried. And it's like not something that I feel like I need to keep trying at. It wasn't like oh my God, I just quit, I just give up. It was more like, okay, is this still serving me, and is this still what I want to do? Because I kept thinking about this work. This was still on my heart. This idea of like making the podcast, writing a book, doing something with like healing work and health and wellness. And like I said, I want to put together like a workshop that has to do with like art as therapy, moving the body, like some journaling, some meditation, like do like a whole thing. But I had to stop and ask myself, like, is it okay if art for me becomes only a spiritual practice? And the answer was a resounding yes. I don't need to be in galleries in New York. I just need to create for me. And if that just ends up on my walls in my home, that's fine. So, number 2, there was not really a list. We don't have a list this week. But number 2, the sort of like second way that I think we can approach creating. And that is, we're going woo-woo here. This is like deep woo-woo, because again, this is contingent upon the belief that there's something larger than yourself, whether you believe that is like God or the universe or source, force, source energy, spirit, angels, guides, whatever. And you are open to viewing yourself as a vessel through which the creator can create. So sometimes I'll approach work this way. I often approach paintings this way. Sometimes I'll even approach doing video work this way when I feel like I don't know what to say because I am new to this. I'll ask, the universe, I'll say, just speak through me. What is it that I need to create? What is it that I need to give back? And I allow myself to just be a vessel for that creation. And I think sometimes you can approach any form of art this way. So that's kind of like the difference, right? You can maybe sit down and do some embroidery work in terms of like de-stressing and calming your mind and like whatever. Or maybe I actually do, I don't know the name of the company or the name of the gal, but I remember meeting her at this art fair and I actually she is who got me into embroidery because I'd always wanted to kind of pick up like sewing, like just for fun. She had these little embroidery kits. And you could get the kit and it had like a little pasty thing and it taught you several different stitches so that if you wanted to get into embroidery, once you finished the little thing that she gave you, you now have like 10 different stitches that under your belt and you can like keep the hoop, use it for something else. So that was like, oh my gosh, like I got really into it. But her work has a lot of moxie. Like she'll have a lot of stuff that's like feminist, or it's like political, or it's like there's a lot of messaging in her embroidery work. And I think that's one of those situations where, while she probably enjoys the practice for what it is, that's a lot of like creating through her, like getting that message, getting that work out into the ether, out into the world. And so I think anything can be that. Absolutely anything can be that. But there is, I think, a distinction between, for me, embroidery is just a way to de-stress, have some fun, spend some time. I actually really love, as you know, I love an outfit. I love like clothes. I really do want to learn how to like pattern and like make clothes. But right now, that's a lot for me. I have a lot going on. I have a lot more that I'm trying to do. So I haven't made time for that. But what I do make time for is like updating clothes. Like I will sew embroidery onto something, or that's part of why I wanted to pick it up. Like I'll embroider a pocket or put on a patch, or like I did a little painting on a shirt the other day. I need to finish that because there was also some embroidery work with it, and when I do, you guys can totally see it. I have this actually super cute military jacket situation that I got at a vintage shop, and I was going to paint like this really cool like tiger thing on the back. Just doing stuff like that with creating. And that's more for me. That's just for fun. That's just for joy. That's just for leaning into joy. That's just for leisure. I have no grand scheme of becoming some kind of like fashion designer. Although, guys, I was so obsessed with Project Runway when I was growing up. Auf Wiedersehen. Okay. I love to laugh about it because like now I think when you look back, there's all kinds of like problems that they had with those kinds of shows. Particularly, I was obsessed with America's Next Top Model, and like now a lot of those models are coming out like talking about how that show was like abuse, or I was just like, oh my god. But when I was 14, I was obsessed. So no grand schemes to do that. So there's that realm of like, I just do this for fun. And then sometimes with painting, particularly for me with painting, it can be that, but it can also be that moment of like, okay, I just need creation to work through me, and I'm the vessel, and let me just get this out. Whatever needs to come out, I just want to be in here making something. So I think there's just those two different kind of ways that you can really approach creativity and creating. And that's up for you to decide, honestly. But more importantly, lean into the joy of it. I think the joy and the leisurely aspect, finding something that you like, maybe it's something you just want to learn how to do. Like I said, I just really wanted to learn how to sew. I wanted to learn how to embroider. Doing something like that, I think, is important. Leaning into that joy. Joy and leisure is one of the 8 slices of the Full Circle Wellness pie. I think that feeds the spirit. It calms the mind. And those things are good for the body and the body's systems, because when your stress is low, your cortisol levels are low, your hormones are imbalanced, your body is working, all of that stuff works together, which is why I have it as a pie model. It just works and feeds. When the mind is working, the body's working. When the body's working, the spirit is good. The spirit is feeding the mind, is feeding the body. Like all of those things working in tandem, right? So that's our conversation today, guys. And as far as art school goes, I mean, if you want to go to art school, y'all go to art school. Don't let somebody tell you that that's like not a valid career, because let me tell you this. While I did major in painting, I did end up with a creative job. That is the job that sustains my lifestyle, that gets me the freedom and the time and the funding to sit here and do this and lean into this as like a side project and a passion project. There is life in the arts. It is definitely harder to make a life, I think, as like a studio artist. Like if you want to be doing like gallery shows and stuff like that, there is a lot of like perfection in photographing your work, sending it to galleries, answering calls to artists. And that's certainly, that's certainly a thing. But a lot of the times too, I noticed like when you would answer calls to artists, which is when like a gallery sends out a call to artists, they say, hey, we're going to have a show. It's about this. Please submit work. Sometimes you have to pay a non-refundable fee just to have them deny your work. And if you are already struggling, that does not work out. It's best to look for like free CTAs, and that absolutely exists. But I'll just caveat that if you're listening to this thinking about going into the arts or doing something with creativity in that way, and you're not here for the woo-woo half of the conversation, That's just my 2 cents. That was just one of those things where, like, if I saw one, I mean, I've seen them where it's like $50 to submit your work, and I'm like, bullshit. No, okay, I'm good. $10, okay, sure, I understand. I understand why they need the funds, I get it. But I don't have that money. I don't want to put my money towards that. I have other things that I wanted to do, and that's where I started to realize that, like, maybe being an artist, like, the artist, be an artist, wasn't quite my path. All of this kind of work, leaning into talking about wellness, and even if it's a little bit of creativity, like leaning in, like we're talking about creativity in the space of wellness, that calls to me a lot more. And then, you know, making art just because it heals my soul a little bit. So that's all I've got for you guys tonight. That's the conversation. If you want more, if you want to lean further into that, join us in the Full Circle Wellness private Facebook community. I will link that out in the comments. I will also link out, we talked a little bit about that mindset here tonight. We talked about, you know, leaning into joy, settling into like the growth of healing trauma, how that's going to take some time. There's a lot of mindset that goes into that. There's a lot of time and process that goes into that. And if that's something you want to dive into, I've got a really fantastic, what did I call it? The complete guide to mastering your mindset. You see, this is why I'm not a salesperson. I can't get on here and talk like I'm on a commercial. And I think you guys would feel like that was fake anyway. Mastering your mindset guide. I've got it. I've made it. I think it's juicy. I've had a couple of my friends go through it, review it. I've gotten some good feedback. So I think if you're working on your mindset, or if you want to start diving into personal development and you're kind of like unsure and you just need that push, check that out. I'm going to link that out in the comments. And then if you just want to keep hanging out with me, I mean, I've got a couple more episodes that came before this one, so check those out. And if you dug this at all, share it with a friend. If you think somebody wants to hear me talk about art school and creating and creativity and woo-woo goodness, shoot them my video. And please, please, please like and subscribe to the channel. That will help me and my larger goals out so much. And again, if you want to find me on social media, I'm at @thereal_Leah Suzette. And I'll link all the goodies out in the show notes. Wait, there are no show notes. I think there's show notes. They're in the comments. You guys are going to find it in the comments. Okay? That's it. I'll see you guys later. Be well. And now, drum roll, you're going to see me get up and stop this video.